It is a Monday morning. We are live on Reier on YouTube, where it is time once again for TR in the AM following an active weekend of Southeastern Conference football. A lot to get into on the show this morning. We, as always, appreciate you for jumping on board with us. It's early. It's 7 a.m. straight up on the eastern side of things, and then, of course, 6 a.m. Central. So there is a commitment required. I understand that to catch us live here on Reier on YouTube. We appreciate it once again. We are going to take your comments and your thoughts from the college football weekend right there in the show chat. I see Little Joe C has already chimed in this morning. Good morning, Little Joe C. And clocks went back Saturday night, didn't they? Clocks went back. We had Halloween, pretty uneventful Halloween around the old neighborhood. Now, there are more and more areas, it seems like anyway. I don't know about in your neck of the woods where it feels like Halloween's becoming an even bigger deal. Seems like more communities are really taking it to another level, big crowds. So hopefully you had a fun and safe Halloween, you and the little ones, if you have some little ones. It's always a good time. When the kids are, we had kids at one point at probably like 3, 8, or 4, 8, and 10. That was good. That was really really fun in those days. Turning the clocks back in the day used to not be much fun because you had to remember we still get all these alerts. Do we still need all the alerts for turn the clock back on that Saturday night? I mean, our phones and our devices pretty much do it for themselves now, right? But even with that, I wake up Sunday morning thinking it is, you know, like 7 a.m., but it's really 8 a.m. And I dutifully set that timer on that coffee machine because once you hit 50 years old, that becomes one of your favorite chores is to make sure that coffee timer is set on the machine. So you wake up to that fresh coffee in the morning. I had it set, but the coffee machine actually did the change for itself with the and I didn't think about it. So maybe I did need the alert because I woke up to cold coffee on a Sunday morning. There you go. I still need the alerts, I guess. It would help me out still these days. Again, another eventful Saturday in the SEC, even with teams like Alabama on the bye, Texas A&M on the bye, Missouri on the bye. It was also another bloody Sunday in the SEC coaching ranks, both at the head coach and coordinator levels. The clocks went back, but time still ran out on Hugh Freeze at Auburn and Mike Shula in that coordinator role for Shane Beamer at South Carolina. We'll start obviously with Hugh Freeze. You know, nearly 3 years ago, Auburn, an athletic director, John Cohen, choked down the PR sewer sub, I'll call it, that was hiring the previously disgraced Freeze. Nearly 3 years later, central reasons for Auburn taking that hit back then, the promise of an entertaining and championship caliber offense, along with the winning Freeze had done everywhere else he'd been. Well, no, they had gone largely, entirely undelivered on the offense, the winning. You know, where the offense is concerned, and Freeze's nearly 3 years on the Plains, Auburn ranked 14th, 12th, and 11th in scoring O, respectively. Where the winning was concerned, Freeze didn't win more than 3 SEC games in any of his 3 seasons at Auburn. And none, of course, had come against rival Alabama, and none appeared to be coming anytime soon. So none of that is what the Tigers signed up for. Freeze was going to have, I believe, the benefit of John Cohen as long as the AD who hired him could possibly allow it. I thought Cohen blasting the SEC refs after the Tigers lost to Georgia last month was essentially a public vote of confidence. It felt like Cohen was saying, it's not my guy. You know, it's more of these awful SEC officiating. I'll say it. I mean, there was some bad officiating that Freeze endured this season, certainly. Now, for Cohen's performance, Freeze rewarded that by dropping both of the home games that followed. And so now, for the third time in 5 years, Auburn will be back in the coaching market. Another hefty buyout thrown upon the fire. What do you think? Maybe John Summerall of Tulane, the former Troy head coach, certainly has deep ties to the state of Alabama. He's been on a consistent ascent in recent years. Even a blowout loss for Tulane at the hands of UTSA late last week probably won't be enough to keep Summerall from being linked to multiple P4 openings. If you're Auburn, do you do a wellness check on Dabo Swinney over at Clemson? Another Alabama guy, obviously played at Alabama. There's familiarity in the surroundings between, I'd say, Auburn and Clemson. After all, the late, great Louis Grizzard, what did he once say? He wrote, anyway, I think, that Clemson is basically Auburn with a lake. In all seriousness, where does this Auburn job rank, though, among the gigs currently open? Obviously, it's a good job, and I think with the right hire, it's a job that person can push for CFP relevancy on a pretty consistent basis. But in terms of current SEC vacancies, it's clearly behind Florida and LSU, right? Although LSU, it feels like, is dead set on trying to push itself down the pecking order. Is the Auburn job better than Arkansas? I'd say it definitely is, but it's probably closer to the Arkansas job than it is to either LSU and Florida. So what are your thoughts on that as we move through a review of the college football weekend, the SEC weekends? I am asking you right here in the show chat, what was your SEC game of the week? And the aforementioned Little Joe C responded with Oklahoma, Tennessee. That was a wild game. We're going to get to that one in just a little bit. That's a pretty good nominee there, Little Joe C. And what we'll do is we'll just work through the windows, I like to call it, from the previous Saturday. And that means we'll start with Texas 34, Vanderbilt 31. The two quarterbacks in this game combined for nearly 700 passing yards. Arch Manning for Texas comes out of concussion protocol to light up the Vandy defense. I thought Sark really worked the perimeter effectively, early and often, getting the ball out of Arch's hands because you don't want him in his situation standing in there and taking shots. And you're probably, as crazy as it sounds, more worried if you're Texas about being able to protect him for an elongated period of time from the pocket against that Vandy defensive front seven. And also, if you're Sark, you're basically saying, okay, we'll grant you that on the line of scrimmage, but we still think everywhere else we're bigger, faster, stronger, and we're going to get our speed matched up and see if you can do something about it. That never really happened for the Vandy defense. Poor tackling by Vandy early in that game had something to do with it too. Wingo was devastatingly effective in the quick game for Texas. And the Texas defense really got after Diego Pavia, sacking him 6 times, forcing that fumble early in the game. Vandy running backs couldn't really get it going. Texas's front seven did a nice job. Cedric Alexander and MK Young for Vanderbilt combined for 9 carries for 18 yards. And you put all that into the pot, and it's 34-10 Texas going into the fourth quarter. And then Pavia goes Johnny Manziel, goes Johnny Football, and he makes it very interesting late. You know, we gave you those trick or treat picks going into the weekend, and one of them was Vandy getting the 3. I like Vandy to win the game. I was obviously wrong about that. But the thing about Diego Pavia, if you bet against that guy where the line is concerned, well, you could have what happened Saturday happen to you. And look, Vanderbilt still had a shot with the onside kick at 34-31. You already had the push with the 3 points. Instead, Texas survives, stumbles home in a lot of ways, and with just one league loss, you know, gets a bye week before heading to Georgia in a couple of Saturdays. Do I trust that Texas has finally gotten right after a tumultuous up and down season at this point? I'm to that point with Arch. I think Arch is right now. I don't think Arch is going to be a lot of fun to deal with. I think the bigger concern is going to be continuing to be that offensive line. If you can get enough run game from Trey Wisner, CJ Baxter, and those guys. But when I think about games against Georgia and Texas A&M still out there, my bigger concerns are with that Texas offensive line and how they're going to match up with those teams. I think they match up better against Georgia actually than they do Texas A&M right now. Now for Vandy, Saturday wasn't a CFP extinguishing loss, was it? Commodores now get Auburn and Kentucky at home before they go to Tennessee. So still a very real possibility of this Vanderbilt team getting to 10-2 and kind of seeing how things play out. And there are certainly more difficult finishes out there for other SEC teams, which, Vandy's going to need, the Texases now and the Alabamas to pick up another loss somewhere because, of course, the Crimson Tide and the Longhorns have the head-to-head over Vandy. Bama Bob chiming in here. Good morning, Bob. Bob says, congratulations on your Jaguars beating my Raiders. That was an exciting, fun finish, at least, Bob, because for about 3 quarters, that was some of the worst football you'll ever see. And especially in that late window, you've got the Bills and the Chiefs on the other channel, and you got the Jags and the Raiders. But it had a hell of a finish. What about my guy, Cam Little, with the 68-yard field goal right before the half? Dude is unreal. There are a lot of Jags fans talking about cutting Cam Little. He had been in a little bit of a slump, so to speak, going into that game, and then he drills the 68-yarder. He had a couple other big kicks, and the Jags get it done in overtime. Props to Trevor Etienne in that game. I've wondered at times, the former Clemson running back, and in terms of his receptiveness to the smoke, dude was physical and was there for it yesterday for the Jaguars. Played a great game. So again, as we move through the slate from Saturday, let's get into the cocktail party. Speaking of Duval, I could walk out onto my back deck and smell the bourbon, and I'm approximately 25 minutes away from Everbank Stadium. But the latest cocktail party was certainly a nip and tuck affair throughout. Really, for me, the game came down to Florida leading 20-17 at the time, getting stuffed on a 4th and 1 from the UGA 18 midway through the fourth quarter. I thought Florida got the football to the player you want to get it to right there. Part of the problem was Georgia very much understands you want to get the ball to Jaden Ball on 4th and 1. And kind of like when Alabama had that opportunity in Athens to put the Dogs away, they didn't go really to where the Dogs thought they were going to go in that short yardage. They got it out to the flat. I think maybe that had as much to do with Alabama trusting its quarterback, Ty Simpson, more than Florida trusts DJ Lagway right now. But from that 4th and 1 stop, Georgia proceeded to go 82 yards. The final 36 coming courtesy of running back Chauncey Bowens for a touchdown run that would prove to be enough for the Dogs to continue that dominance. Kirby dominating Gators right now in that series. Gunnar Stockton, the Georgia quarterback, 2 touchdowns. He did have a pick. That wasn't on him, in my opinion. That was more Noah Thomas not really doing his job on the receiving end. Florida in the game just 2 of 13 on possession down. So it wasn't just the 4th down. They were bad on 3rd and 4th combined. And back to Lagway, still not where many thought he'd be. It's kind of been that year in the SEC for some of the preseason quarterbacks that were really talked about a lot, whether it's Lagway or Lenore Sellers, who we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. Lagway desperately needs a full off season with some good health mixed in. He needs it for his development. That's something he didn't have going into the 2025 season. I think that continues to show. And like Texas, the Dogs still in a great spot for both Atlanta and the college football playoff. Georgia goes on the road this week for an early kickoff in Starkville, rejuvenated state after its first SEC win over Arkansas. And then the Dogs get Texas on the 15th to wrap up SEC play. So Georgia may have to wait a couple weeks to figure out its SEC championship game prospects. And how about this upcoming slate for the interim status there at Florida? After that gut-wrenching loss on Saturday, Florida still goes to Kentucky, feeling itself a little bit on Saturday, still goes to Ole Miss the next Saturday, gets Tennessee on the 22nd, and then Florida State in Gainesville to wrap up the regular season. Oof, still a lot of work for the Gators in a sort of circling the drain mode right now. Speaking of Mississippi State, 31 second half points for the Bulldogs. Come back on the road to get their first SEC win of the Jeff Lebby era. And so it is. Arkansas, the last winless team in SEC play in the conference. How do you rush if you're Arkansas for nearly 240 yards, outrush Mississippi State by nearly 140 yards, I want to say? Well, how do you do that and lose? Well, you get penalized 18 times for 193 yards. And I know Bobby Petrino in the post game had, some curt sort of statements in regards to the officiating, but even Petrino got hit with a flag in the game. You talk about scenarios and where things happen, and at the time you think, well, that might come back to be a real problem for this team. Well, Arkansas goes up 28-14. It just scored to go up 28-14 in the third. Petrino gets flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct. We've kind of joked about it in the past here on the channel, how SEC refs really liked Petrino as an offensive coordinator because it kept him up in the box. He couldn't just wear them out for 60 minutes. Well, Petrino's on the sideline. Maybe Petrino, in retrospect, would have had a far better shot of being the permanent guy for Arkansas if he was head coach from the box, because it hadn't happened down on the field for him. Well, he gets flagged too to go along with one of his players after Arkansas gets in the end zone, converts a 2-point conversion, goes up 14. So now after the 2 penalties, Arkansas is kicking off from its own 10. And then after covering the kickoff, an Arkansas player gets hit with a 15-yarder. And so after all these 15-yarders and the return, Mississippi State down 14 gets set up on the Arkansas 40. And you can guess what happened. What happened from there. And it's sequences like that make it hard to imagine Petrino getting another full run with the Hogs. And I've been a proponent of it. But man, he makes it hard. And give the Mississippi State defense some credit here too. Yeah, they did give it up on the ground. But Arkansas had 3 fourth quarter possessions, and they went like this: punt, turnover on downs. That's how you do it. It doesn't matter if you score 31 second half points. If you're not getting stops, you're not going to run off 31 straight. And Mississippi State, by the way, 1 win away from bowl eligibility. The problem coming up on this schedule: Georgia and Starkville on Saturday, at Missouri, Ole Miss and Starkville. Got to get one from those 3. Just 3 top 20 teams still left on the schedule for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. We talked about the continued struggles for the South Carolina offense. Well, the latest resulted in Shane Beamer cutting ties with Mike Shula as offensive coordinator. Lenore Sellers, like DJ Lagway, as we referenced earlier, has not taken the step forward at the quarterback position that so many thought he would. In fairness to Shula, the former Alabama quarterback and head coach, that South Carolina offensive line has been rough, whether it's injuries, ineffective play. Prior to Shula's dismissal, there had been a change in season at the offensive line job. And South Carolina, as much as anything, hasn't been able to run the ball at the level it did a year ago. In 2024, South Carolina averaged 185 yards per game on the ground. This year, just 100 yards per game. And frankly, Sellers is a passer. If you're going to put that much on him, he's still pretty raw in that regard. Now, as for Ole Miss, I won't go as far as to call 30 points against South Carolina a bad performance. I won't go as far as to say it was a lethargic start to the game for the Rebels, because South Carolina's defense can make offenses sort of look that way. Case in point from Saturday, Ole Miss was just 1 of 11 on third downs against the Gamecocks. Settled for some field goals too in the red zone. You know what, though? I'll actually be complimentary, and I'll call it a mature performance by the Rebels and Lane Kiffin, because even a year ago, you had Ole Miss knock off Georgia in Oxford, but then go on the road and lose to a pretty meh Florida team. Florida was trending in the right direction when Ole Miss went to Florida Field, but there was even still a performance against Kentucky in Oxford earlier last season in which UK went in to Vaught Hemingway and got a win. You haven't seen that. You haven't seen that from Ole Miss so far this season. Not a dazzling outing, I would call it, from Trinidad Chambliss in the Ole Miss passing game, but if you're going to get roughly 170 rushing yards from Kejuan Lacey, it's probably going to be enough. And now Lacey he's had 23 or more carries in 4 games this season. So he's shown he's capable of carrying the load if you need him to. Ole Miss, like Georgia, like Texas, very good shape for the CFP in Atlanta with that one conference loss. Of course, Georgia would have the tie break in a head-to-head. But as much as anything, schedule-wise, right now, looking at Ole Miss, the Rebels go Citadel this week, Florida and Oxford. They get a bye on the 22nd, and then they go to State on Black Friday. So I guess if there's any good news for South Carolina right now, it's that rival Clemson has joined the Gamecocks and massively underachieving this season. Here is Little Joe C's game of the week that we're going to get into here. Check out the comments real quick before we do that. We have got Rick Morrison chiming in from China Grove. Oh, he says he's a Bama fan. Aren't you glad you're not a corn dog? Going to be interesting. Going to be interesting this Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. LSU still has some dudes, man. Still have some dudes. Got the skill players, Berrien Brown. Former Alabama wide receiver Aaron Anderson is getting healthier. But we'll get more into that game later in the week here on Reier on YouTube. But I think for the Alabama defense, it's going to start with Caden Durham and Harlem Berry, the LSU running backs. Going to have to get that job done against the LSU run game first and foremost. But again, as we move through Saturday's action, Oklahoma 33, Tennessee 27. You know that pit in your stomach that you get when you dominate yards, plays, and all that in the first half, but then you look up at the scoreboard and you're down 6? Yeah, that was the balls at halftime Saturday night at Neyland Stadium. That's what 3 turnovers will do. 3 turnovers for Tennessee, including a scoop and score by Oklahoma. That will wipe out a lot of good work and transform a season from CFP viable to perhaps a Florida bowl game not named the Orange. Tennessee quarterback Joey Aguilar, some good stuff, but then 2 more picks too. Now he's got 7. He's got 7 picks in 6 conference games. And I felt like even from the outset, Tennessee was hitting for some chunks, but he was paying the price too. The 2 picks against OU, I think both of those could be attributed to a Sooner defense that really brings it. Can be a little bit boomer or bust, I guess you could say, for the Sooner defense, in that they're either making negative plays or forcing turnovers or they're giving it up. And how about Oklahoma kicker Tate Sandell? 4 of 4 on field goals, including 3 of more than 50 yards for the Oklahoma place kicker. 2 of those from 55. I mean, he has to be the SEC special teams player of the week. Do we even need to check on that today? What a performance. And you probably heard Kirk Herbstreit giving Sandell some grief about the shorts. It has kind of jumped the shark in terms of uniforms and what college players are essentially wearing in tackle football on a week-to-week basis. Sandell taking it to another level. I mean, he looks, like he's going to ride in the Tour de France more than he's going to kick in an SEC football game. But my thing on that is, if the SEC is not enforcing it and it works for you and you're going to go 4 for 4 on field goals, including 2 from 55, I'm almost okay, not okay. Whatever you got to do with those shorts. We'll just put it like that. So for Oklahoma's efforts, they get an off week now, which is big because they had some defensive guys important defensive guys either out or dinged up in that game against Tennessee. And now they're going to get a chance to really get healthy before traveling to Tuscaloosa in 2 weeks. So Alabama's going to be coming off what could be a war against LSU. And then we'll get Tennessee and that defense. John Mateer, not especially great throwing the football for OU against Tennessee, but the dude is a competitor and he's willing to do it with his legs if it comes down to it. And he was very effective in helping to close out that game. Tennessee really let one get away, especially in that first half Saturday night. And so, given the elimination game vibes going into that one, in some ways, it felt like the Sooners won a playoff game on Saturday night. And they'll need to do it again in 12 days in Tuscaloosa. As for the Vols, anything can still happen, but 3 SEC losses, 2 teams that are all ahead of the Vols in the CFP race. It feels more like Tampa, Orlando, or Jacksonville for UT in the postseason at this point. We talked about Hugh Freeze earlier, his dismissal from Auburn. Kentucky 10, Auburn 3. The Wildcats just D'd up the Tigers. And in the process, the Wildcats rid themselves of that winless status among league teams. And I get it. You give credit to Kentucky and the defense for that performance. But boy, watching the Auburn offense in year 3 under Hugh Freeze, that was backyard. That was backyard offense. That was snap the ball to Ashton Daniels to start the game and see what he could do with it. And 7 times in the game, either Daniels or Jackson Arnold, who came on later, were sacked. It was, for both teams, a perfectly imperfect performance on the offensive side of the ball. 241 yards of offense for Kentucky, 240 yards of offense for Auburn. And so after Kentucky's upset, I guess you'll call it an upset. As you recall here on the channel, we like Kentucky getting the 10.5 and covered that easily. Now just Arkansas sits with a warm bagel among league teams in the win column. And who knows, even with the win, perhaps Mark Stoops will be on the market in the not too distant future. After Saturday's win, Kentucky is now just 2-14 in its last 16 SEC games. So I don't think that's the kind of win that just sort of erases a lot that's gone wrong for Kentucky over the last 2 seasons or so. You really got to go back to the end of the 2023 season when Kentucky knocked off a rival Louisville to find a true bright spot for this program. And, 2-14 in 16 SEC games, that's how bowl streaks, like the 8-year run that Stoops and the Cats put together from 2016 to 2023, come to an end. And then you add in the Texases and the Oklahomas to the league, and bowl eligibility has become a lot more difficult for teams like Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. So as far as the trick or treat picks from over the weekend, we got home with the Vandy +3, or actually we got the push with the Vandy +3. We got home on the under in Georgia, Florida. That was 50.5. Our boy Gunnar Stockton taking that knee at the half-yard line to keep it at 44 total. How about that? Also, Georgia fans not happy because a lot of them had laid the 7, and Gunnar prevented that. Well, Kirby Smart prevented it. Gunnar didn't just make that call. I'm sure that came from Kirby. And Gunnar hurt the overcrowd. MSU, Arkansas, we had the under. That thing got crazy in the second half. Probably should have known that was going to happen. It went over. We had Ole Miss laying the 12.5 at South Carolina. They end up winning by 16. We had Tennessee laying the 2.5 against Oklahoma. That did not happen. And we had Kentucky getting the 10.5 at Auburn. So just the way the man likes it. You know how the man likes it in Vegas? He likes pushes. He likes to get his 10%. So we went 3-2-1. He'll take that every day. The man will take that every single day. Any other comments before Smoked Pork Chop chiming in here before we get out of here on a Monday morning? He says waterboarding has been replaced by rerun viewings of the Kentucky Auburn game. It was rough. That was rough viewing. That was not a lot of fun. I had the one TV on Oklahoma, Tennessee Saturday night. We're all sort of creatures of habit when it comes to our game day viewing. Got to caffeinate real quick. Sorry about that. We had Tennessee, Oklahoma on the one big, and then we had the 4-box. How did the YouTube thing impact you over the weekend, or did it? The YouTube TV and ESPN thing. I have the ESPN Plus, so I just kept that thing rolling pretty much all weekend. And ESPN Plus did have the quad box, which was nice, of the SEC games. So I paid the man. I paid. It stinks because I pay YouTube TV for that ESPN, and didn't have it from over the weekend. So that wasn't a lot of fun, obviously. But hey, good weekend. Hope each and every one of you enjoyed it. Good start to this week. Let's make it a good one. A little bit different, a little bit dark to start the show outside the studio this morning. So still adapting to that time change. Might take a little bit. Going to get dark early. Those 2:30 games coming up. It's going to be pretty much dark in the second half instead of a dwindling sky like we've had for the first couple of months of the season. Travis Reier, thanking you once again for joining us right here on Reier on YouTube. Throughout the week, we're going to have continued content. We're going to have second helping, just like the hat says right there. We'll have second helping coming up this week with Brent Beard. We'll have Talking Tide coming up with Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News. We'll preview LSU Alabama with Chase coming up later in the week. We'll have No Sleep Teal, talk some Jacksonville Jaguars and some NFL on that program with Evan Reier. And of course, right here on TR in the AM. Thanks for getting up with us. As always, the show does archive right there on Reier on YouTube and is available in podcast form. So Stitcher, iTunes, I guess, Apple, Spotify. The show will download in podcast form to those outlets and several others. Have a great rest of your Monday, everybody. Until next time, so long.